Welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. But as we like to say, more importantly, it's about recovery. And my road to recovery began with Pinnacle. So do what I did. If you need help, give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. Now, before we jump right into this, I feel like there's something that needs to be cleared in the room. And we can do it just really quick by raising your hand. Are you in or out on tubs? Wait a minute.
I love a good tub.
We're talking
and
about.
Don't tell me Josh didn't enjoy his last tub.
Yeah, he did enjoy his tub, and we're talking about bathing. And I was talking to Matt earlier this week about this week's episode, and you said, I'm in the tub right now watching Netflix.
We had a meeting. We had a meeting while I was in the tub.
I said, you're a 47-year-old man. You should not be in the tub watching Netflix. And you said, I did yard work all day. This is the best part of my day.
It was the best part of my day. You get the lavender soap going, turn the Netflix on.
You're losing
get the
credibility.
Jets,
You're losing credibility.
It's very relaxing.
All right, let's get
It's
into
not bathing, though. It's soaking. We call it a soak. I call it a soak.
Sitting in your own swaller.
Yeah.
Do you shower after?
You can.
Do you?
If I need to. If I'm going somewhere.
Why are you avoiding the...
I usually go to bed.
Let's get to something more important. Let's get into recovery. So this show is kind of your show today. You kind of designed this.
Well, yeah, I think today I wanted to make sure. So we're talking. We've been talking about substance abuse.
We've been
addiction,
heavy on it, on alcohol, opioids, heroin,
and that was the inspiration for doing the whole podcast. Was your experience, and I've just really enjoyed bringing people on and letting them tell their story and explain their process and where they're at in their recovery and what good they're doing for the community. And as we've done that, we've been talking, and we've had a lot of great feedback on Facebook about what about other kinds of addictions? Are behaviors and those sorts of things really addictions?
I've had people on the Facebook page go, I'm not addicted to any substance, but through this podcast, I've realized that I might be addicted to food. I might be addicted to the internet. I might be addicted to gambling. And so when we did start this podcast, we wanted to focus mainly on substance at the beginning, but we wanted to broaden it out because we feel like a lot of the patterns and a lot of the things, there are similarities in that's going to lead into other stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people are trapped in the same sort of cycle, which we'll talk about, of addiction, but it's not with something that we recognize as an addictive substance easily. It could be, like you said, gambling or another behavior. Food's a big one here in Utah and other places. And so we want to talk about what is an addiction, and then are these other things addictions as well? And in the future, we're planning to bring on experts in the field, both in research and in treatment, people that provide therapy. And we're hoping to bring in some people that are in recovery from some of these behavioral addictions.
There seems to be kind of a line in addiction that the public accepts and doesn't. Like if it's against the law and you're addicted to it, then it's bad. Yeah. But if you can get it at the supermarket, if you can get it on the internet, and
if it's a behavior that other people do, that is, watching Netflix in the tub. Some people talk about, like, well, I'm just watching Netflix, but somebody might watch a few episodes, somebody might watch for 10 hours. And there's a difference in using the internet and being addicted to the internet. So we want to talk about those differences and in the future bring people up on the show so they can talk about it. So today's episode is we're going to kind of get into what's an addiction really, and how can behaviors be considered addictions, or sometimes we'll talk about impulse control disorders, and there's very little difference in the difference between
In my heavy drinking days, I used to say all things in moderation, including moderation.
Including moderation, yeah.
And so I'm still navigating this world, and I know when we start the podcast, we kind of like to do a check-in with me and what's going on in my recovery. And I can tell you, because we run an honest program here, today's not a good day.
Yeah,
I mean it's not bad because I'm not in jail.
But there were free burgers out there.
Yeah, and you got to go for the silver lining when you can. Right. But sometimes in my recovery, I'm going through the motion. I'm doing everything I can, everything that's expected from me, everything that I can do, I do. But still, at the end of the day, you come up short.
Yeah.
And it gets frustrating. And it can lead to a negative mindset, and it can take you down a dark path. Now, I haven't drank. I haven't done anything. I'm almost 300 days without any kind of substance.
Which is great.
Which is amazing. Yep. And I never thought that would be possible. And so I count that as a victory. But sometimes when I'm taking the bus, or I can't take my kids to their friend's house to go swimming, or my kid can't go play at a friend's house.
All that normal stuff a guy would do.
That you take for granted. And it's tough. And so you just get frustrated. And I sometimes I don't know where to turn. Luckily, I've got a great girlfriend. My ex-wife's been amazing. My parents have been amazing. You've been amazing, and friends. And so I have to remind myself that I have a lot of good things. But it's real easily to think, man, the world is just coming at me, and I'm doing everything I can, and I'm still coming up short.
And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about today was, you are unique. You're in that smaller percentage of people that are just naturally optimistic. That you're always seeing that silver lining, whereas the rest of us kind of have to push ourselves to see it. But even optimistic people, you have your ups and downs. So when you're having a hard day and you maybe feel an urge, like, oh, I just want to escape, one of those urges that might have been associated with drinking in the past, what do you do? Like I think the listeners want to know what does Casey do when he gets an urge?
So last night, I'm laying in bed, I'm watching TV, I'm getting ready to go to bed, and I feel this panic attack coming on. And I don't know really what it's from, but then I start to kind of dive into it, and it's a myriad of all things. It's my relationship, it's my kids, it's my finances, it's my job, it's my future. And so all that stuff starts swimming around in my head. Now, normally that's when I'd be like, I'll knock this out with 2 beers and I'll be right to bed.
Yeah.
But that's not an option.
Right.
And I don't have alcohol in the house. I don't have a car. I couldn't go get it. So I know that's not an option. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then I start to go, okay, what are things that I can deal with immediately? What can I do? Well, I can't do anything with my finances right now. I can't do anything with my relationship. I can't do – so, okay, what do you do? Okay, I take a deep breath. Take a deep breath.
Okay. Got it. Using the breathing, the mindfulness stuff.
And if I do that for 2 minutes, deep breath, in the nose, out the mouth. I mean, last night it was crazy because in my head, I could hear my heart going, just getting increasingly faster and faster and faster.
That's a panic attack.
And then all of a sudden, I take a deep breath and I can hear it slowing down. Mm-hmm. Everything seems a little bit easier. Okay, I get up, I splash some water in my face, and I think, okay, my kids are in my house. I've got a house. Mm-hmm. I'm okay. There's nothing I can do about it right now.
There you go.
There's nothing I can do. But I know everybody's safe. I'm okay. And tomorrow's a new day, and I'll be able to look at it with better eyes. I need to get some sleep.
Great.
So I thought I was going to be able to go back to sleep, so I laid in bed, and then I see it start to ramping up again. And I go, okay, I need to take a break. So I go downstairs, pour me a big bowl of Cinnamon Life.
Cinnamon Life.
I love Cinnamon Life.
Was it 1985 again?
I love it, man.
They still make Cinnamon Life.
Oh, yeah. Huh? Don't get the Vanilla Life because that's horrible.
That sounds awful.
I tried that. It's horrible. But the Cinnamon Life. And if you can eat it at the right time, when it's not too soft and not too crunchy.
Right, that's the key with
life.
There
is nothing better than a bowl of Cinnamon Life.
Yeah.
So I went down there, had a bowl of Cinnamon Life.
That was the only sugary cereal my mom would get us growing up, by the way.
Drank the milk afterwards, went up, saw my kids, laid down in bed. And I got up this morning. Now, when I woke up this morning, I still had a lot of those things on my mind, but I knew I systematically could start to attack those. Yeah. And I went for it, and it seemed okay. But it's still tough. I mean, I'm still taking an Uber to the train to here, and I got to figure that out. And my kids aren't getting anywhere that they need to be.
So the problems didn't go away, but the way you handled it was you got into and this is highly recommended. You get into your body first when you start to have those panic attacks. Mm-hmm. When people have a strong urge to use, they usually have a lot of physical tension in their body, increased heart rate, all of that. So it's really important to do what you did, which is start by calming your body down. For most people, something like breathing, meditation, stretching, those sorts of things are really helpful. Give it time for the body to calm down. And then you get into your head. If you do that first, the body will win.
Yeah.
So you want to get into your head later. And one of the things that people who come see me are probably tired of hearing is nothing cures anxiety quite as well as a good plan. Thinking about the future is anxiety thinking. When you're anxious, you're always thinking about the what-ifs and the to-dos and all of that. And so by coming up with a plan, which may be as simple as yours last night, which is, listen, I'm going to count my blessings. I'm going to look at my gratitude. I have my kids here in my home, and everybody's healthy and safe. Tomorrow's a new day, and tomorrow I will start to attack some of these issues that are on my mind. I'm going to call somebody and help me get a question answered or something like that. Gives you a jumping off point for the next day is a good enough plan for most people to be able to go to bed. And more importantly for you, doing that helped you get around that urge to drink and have another day of sobriety.
But that's why drinking was so easy, because two beers gone.
Right.
The problems never went away.
Oh no, they kind of got bigger.
Yeah, they were really bigger. But I could escape that moment just like that.
Yeah.
And I could fall asleep, but then I normally wake up at 4 and have a panic attack. But I'm not waking up at 4 and having panic attacks. But drinking's not an option for me. It's just not even on the table. I mean. So what I got to do is I got to attack the stuff in front of me.
Making that commitment is such a huge part of the whole process, is that you've said it several times today. It's not an option. And so as soon as you commit to something not being an option, you have to use other mechanisms, and that's great.
You got to deal with the problems head on.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to deal with the problems that you can deal with at that time. Like I said, my finances, there's nothing I can do at 11 o'clock at night.
No.
And if I open up that box, then I'm going to be up all night long. If I go look at my statements or any of that stuff, it's like there's nothing I can do. It's 11 o'clock at night. Let's just be thankful we're home, we're safe, we're good to go. Yeah. So today's not a great day. It's not a bad day. I'm not in jail. I'm able to come here and talk to you.
And you're able to add one more day to your list of
They say it all the
sobriety.
time.
Yeah.
Another 24.
Yeah.
I'll just take it 24. And some people right out of the gate, 24 is a mountain. And just to get that 24 is amazing. And so for you guys out there that get another 24, congratulations.
Good job. Yeah. And I don't, it sounds cheesy maybe, but I'm proud of you, Casey. I've watched you go through this process, and I know how tough it's been, and so many other people relate to that, and it's great. 24 hours is a big deal sometimes. Sometimes those days fly by, and sometimes they last a really long time.
Sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes an hour.
Yeah.
You got to take what you can.
Well, let's talk about addiction a little bit today. First of all, it's important for people to understand when we talk in the field of mental health and addiction, we're talking about a brain disorder, okay? Or we're talking about a brain mechanism that's involved in addiction. And sometimes that's referred to as a reward pathway. And basically what's happening is it's something is triggering the neurochemical called dopamine, and there are other chemicals involved too. And that pathway, what it does is it creates this reward loop. Your brain is designed to reward you for doing things that are keep you alive, adaptive, healthy. And so that feel-good feeling you get after doing something you really enjoy, there's dopamine surging in your brain. Right?
As a young guy, I understood that kind of because I knew when I made people laugh, it made me feel good.
Yeah.
And so then I spent a lot of time as a kid trying to make people laugh, and it was more about making me feel good than making them feel good, because when they laughed, I felt good. And so it was kind of that reward system.
Absolutely, and that's a perfect example of why, or how I should say, sometimes the things that become part of our personality and our habitual behavior every day as an adult can actually be traced back to, the first time you made somebody laugh and you went, whoa. I got a positive response from them, and I feel great.
Yeah.
And so that reinforced your behavior, and you did it over and over and over again. And most of the time, you're pretty funny, so that works.
But on the other side of that coin, I've also been told, hey, look, you don't be funny all the time. You don't have to be funny all the time. And
so it got a little addicting, huh?
Yeah, and I didn't know how. I didn't know how to not to be funny.
Right.
I didn't know how to handle a serious conversation. I would do that, to escape, and so I had to learn not to
do that all the time.
Yeah,
and I think that's one of the things we talked about early in the podcast this year was how through this process coming on the podcast, you're not here to be funny anymore. This is a new side of you.
No, if I want to be funny, then I'll throw it out there. But nobody's tuning this in because they go, "Oh, that podcast on recovery is hilarious."
Yeah, hopefully. I mean,
we had a comedian on, and afterwards he goes, "I wasn't very funny," and I was
they
like,
didn't even tell any jokes.
Yeah, I was like, "Well, it's a podcast about recovery."
It's not super funny. We try to make it entertaining, but that reward pathway. What happens is a behavior happens or something happens. Dopamine is released in your brain. It feels super good, and then you are geared. Your brain's pre-wired to want to repeat that behavior because it feels so good. So behaviors can become habitual over time, like being funny, being a comedian.
Is this kind of like Pavlov's theory?
It's very similar, yeah. I mean, it's a similar idea that in Pavlov's, we're pairing two things together that don't necessarily go together, but it's triggering a similar reward system in the brain, absolutely.
Okay.
And this creates a cycle. The cycle in addiction would be this, and we'll break it down real simple. The first step is a person becomes kind of preoccupied or anticipates the thing that's going to make them feel good. Mm-hmm. So in your case, something non-substance related with humor, you probably know that you kind of, I know you do this, even though we've never talked about it, you anticipate, you start thinking ahead about funny things you can say.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Pete, you see somebody, and I wish everybody could walk around the KSL building with Casey, because he's got a nickname or a funny thing to say to everybody. Everybody knows Casey, and I know you're kind of anticipating. So you anticipate this thing that's going to make you feel good. Then you do it. In an addiction cycle, this becomes one of the unhealthy aspects, is you start to binge, dopamine's engaged, and a person will do that thing because it feels so good over and over and over again. And that's where that process of tolerance starts to happen. Your brain gets used to a certain amount of dopamine, and you need to increase the amount of whatever it is, humor or beer or whatever.
So in my drinking days, when I started, 3 beers would do it.
Right.
And then through college, it became 6, 8, 10, 12, and then towards the end, it was 16 beers. And I'll sometimes to see the look on someone's face and they go, "Well, how much were you really drinking?" And I go, "Well, it would depend. Sometimes it would be 16, sometimes it would be 24. And they go, "Beers in a day?" And I'll be like, yeah.
And most people can't wrap their mind around going home after work and drinking 24 beers. I mean, it's just way too much. But you had built up a tolerance over time. Yeah,
and so you needed more the next day, And sometimes, after a bender, you'd have it in your system, so you wouldn't need that much. But,
So let's go on to step 3. How do you feel then if you've been binging and getting all that going and that dopamine and that intoxication, and then you don't have access to the beer for a while? How
Depressed.
Do you feel? Yeah.
Empty, shallow, hollow.
It's a real letdown. Physical too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I try to explain to people. It was like I would tell myself, I'm not going to drink today. I'm not going to drink today. But I drank the night before. So the next day I'd wake up and I'd be mindful. I'm not going to drink. But then something had happened in my body, and I was like, oh. And before I knew it, I was driving to the Maverick without even knowing it.
Just kind of on autopilot, huh?
Yeah, and then walking right to the beer cooler, grab it, set it up on there. And then
that dopamine is a very powerful drug. Our brains are amazing. Their main job is to keep us alive. That we adapt to our environment, we adapt to things, and one of those mechanisms is this reward system. Something that makes us feel good, our brain says we should keep doing that.
I would start to feel good even before I got the beer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Your brain can anticipate.
Yeah.
Your brain will start to release dopamine, and you start to get, for example, maybe an average example would be when you anticipate eating something that you love. How does your mouth feel? You
start salivates.
Yeah, you start to salivate and you get that water going in there. You can almost taste it, and the smells come in, and you're getting that release even before you put the food in your mouth. Same thing with addiction. Everybody who's an addict will understand this, that just thinking about it, anticipating it, knowing you're a few moments away from your drug of choice, you start to feel better.
I love the sound of a can being open.
And there is your Pavlov example.
Yeah,
that sound in and of itself has no meaning at all until it's been paired with the feeling you get from drinking beer after beer after beer. And so to this day, one of the things that will still be a trigger for you, and it may be forever, I don't know, is that sound will be like, oh.
I mean, I mostly associate it with alcohol. I mean, 90%.
Not soda, not 7-Ups or Sunkist, right? Yeah, but for somebody else, that sound has no meaning. For somebody else, it might be, the sound of a soda, so it's not that meaningful to them. But for somebody who drank beer as their DOC, then, yeah, that sounds pretty powerful. I remember a long time ago meeting a guy who I thought was ancient at the time, but he was probably 80 years old. And we were talking about smoking, and he said he hadn't smoked since he was in his 20s. But his smoking started when he was 6 years old with his brothers.
Wow.
Working in a field. And they rolled their own cigarettes, and it was a very certain type of tobacco and a certain smell. And he said every once in a while, if he's he'd been 60 years since he'd smoked, but he said still to that day, if he smelled that same type of tobacco, he knew he kind of brought back all that rush of the good feeling. And the good feeling for him was associated with obviously the nicotine and the smoking, but the time with his brothers.
Yeah.
His brothers, he had like 4 older brothers that treated him well, and all that association. It can be a powerful thing.
I was a smoker for 20 years, and I quit when my daughter was 4. So she's 14 now, so 10 years ago. But for the first 2 years after I quit smoking, as soon as I got in the car, I still rolled the window down. The toughest parts were right after meals.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things when I went into Pinnacle, I didn't want to leave with any more habits that I went in. And I thought I was going to start smoking again. But I'd go out there and I'd hang out by the smoking tree, but I never started smoking cigarettes. But
good for you.
I mean, it was, those things right afterwards, those were tough.
Yeah, that's tough. It's hard not to go back to something like that. So that cycle, the addiction cycle it starts with a preoccupation or anticipation, thinking about it. It's on your mind. People are thinking about when am I going to be able to get my beer or my DOC, whatever it happens to be. Then they jump into it, and it's not casual. It's binging, whatever it happens to be. And then once you're not with it anymore, and that binging part's the part you're trying to feel good, you're trying to feel better, you're trying to increase your dopamine. But that tolerance starts to happen. Your brain needs more and more of that in order to get the same feeling. And over time, like you've said many times, what was fun when you were younger started to become hellish. It was awful.
I used to say, there's good days and bad days. Now, when I first started, there was a lot more good days than bad days.
Right.
Towards the end,
all
nothing
bad
bad days.
Yep.
It was a sea of bad days.
And so because you start to exhaust that dopamine system in your brain, and that reward system just exhausts itself and needs more and more and more.
Drinking became a job. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It wasn't for reward anymore. It was like, I got to do this just to feel normal, or I've got to do this just to make it through the day.
And then when you're thinking those thoughts, you're in that third step where you're on the downside of it. You have a withdrawal symptom, these negative effects. Physically, you don't feel right. You don't feel normal. You don't feel average. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to start anticipating getting some of that, and then I'm going to binge. And then when I don't have it, I feel let down. I have that withdrawal, so I need to get more of it. And so you're right. It becomes this job which controls you instead of you feeling in control.